Welcome to the Glassworking Shop. In this video, I'm going to be attempting something that I've never done before in exactly this way. I've done kind of similar things, but this one's going to be very experimental. I got kind of inspired by watching some of the YouTube blacksmiths, in particular Alex Steele, and his fabrication of Damascus using layers of different types of steel. So in this video, I'm going to attempt to layer together 11 different pieces of glass that have been wadded up into a cylinder, covered with a thin outside layer of black, then squeezed into a more or less flat shape. In this video, I'll be refining the shape, stretching them out a little, and attempting to put them all together into an 11-layer stack, and then squeezing them into a triangle. This is something new, never tried it before, so wish me luck. This is more of a minimal video, mostly for my own memory, and I am trying to document and memorize and work according to plans. So today's plan is going to be a kind of a Damascus style layered effect and then some bullseyes around the edge. As I'm preparing to assemble this 11-layer Damascus-like piece of glass, I gotta have my glass prep labeled because it's almost impossible to tell which color is which when they're hot. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is prepare some flat punties that I'm going to use for pulling out the flat glass pieces that I made in the previous videos. I need to pull them out into a usable form before I try sticking them together. So I'm just going to very simply flatten out some ends. I could do this on the squeezer, but you know, it's so easy just to do it the old school way, the manual way. As I've said in previous videos, there's always a question, do I do it the old school manual way, or do I use my new tools, invent new techniques, come up with new ideas? In some cases, the old school manual way is all I really need. Sometimes it's faster. Sometimes I alternate doing it sometimes by hand, sometimes on the machine. Just putting a little flat on the end of these guys so that they match up a little bit better with the flattened pieces that I have sitting in the kiln waiting to be stretched and assembled. I've done a similar version of this before, so it's actually not totally the first time I've done it, but it's the first time I've ever tried 11 layers, that's for sure. And of course, I have no idea how big or unmanageable the final result may get. I've got my pieces labeled because once glass gets hot, especially when it's covered with black, pretty much no way to know what's what. I'm building this thing from the center outward, and the center section is going to be North Star Star White covered with North Star Jet Black. I'm starting to develop the skill here and I may not even need to pull this one out, starting to develop the skill to use gravity to refine my shapes without marvering and without pulling. Although on this piece, I really do want to, since this is going to be the core of the final assembly, I want to have a better puntee. So I am gonna puntee up here. And then just see if I can control this glass I'm trying to stretch out this end a little bit, get it a little bit longer, get the sides a little bit more parallel. I'm aiming for approximately a 3-inch piece of usable material, and of course the ends aren't really that good. So I need to leave a little extra. I did a kind of an eye-opening calculation on yield of assemblies when assemblies are made out of pieces that are pulled. Even with good pulling technique and keeping your knuckles minimum, keeping your waist under control, you never get 100%. There's always a little bit at the end that's not the highest quality, and if you repeat the process over and over again, your yield starts suffering really badly. So if you only get 50% yield in the first operation, the second one is only 25, the third one is only 12.5, and then you get down to like 6% yield if you've got 4 steps. Which is why I think it's so important to work on the technique of controlling the knuckle and pulling as much usable material as possible with as little waste. So, also, as I make this assembly, it's going to change a lot, probably in fairly unpredictable ways. And I'm not sure exactly what the final dimension is going to end up being. So there's a good chance that the second or third one of these that I do will be a little bit more under control. Okay, so here's my base piece that all the other pieces will be formed onto. Hey, all you beginners out there, don't ever touch the hot end. It's good practice, and no, I didn't seriously burn myself, but when I cut it off with the shears, I let it fall with the hot end facing me, which is a really bad mistake. You always want the hot end to be facing away from you. Good thing I only barely touched it. So the next layer, I'm putting the first layer into the kiln just to kind of keep it warm. The next layer is going to be North Star Canary yellow, covered in North Star jet black. And I'm going to build the pattern out in a symmetric way, with the center core being white, and then on both sides of it, going to have some yellow, followed by goldenrod, lava, and cherry, all of which will be covered with black. So I need to, this is a bigger piece of prep, which is intentional. I've intentionally done this way. I need to pull this one out to double size, since I need to get two pieces out of it. So this one needs to be at least 6 inches, probably a little bit longer. And of course, since this is a highly experimental first time, I don't have experience that allows me to calculate any of this stuff, so a lot of it is just kind of rough guesses. As I gain experience doing this process, I'll get it a little more under control and be able to predict a little bit more. But somehow I suspect that even when I get it further under control and get some more experience, that glass is hard to predict, even if you're good at it. It's not like machine work. Pretty much everything I do in the machine shop is CAD design CNC simulation. I pretty much have no surprises in the machine shop except for a few surprises sometimes on feeds and speeds, even though I try to go by the book and use the recommended feeds and speeds for the particular material and the particular cutter. Sometimes the geometry, the coolant access, the available speed on the machine end up requiring me to use a different combination of feeds and speeds. So, just very slowly and carefully probably the biggest area of improvement that I need to practice and work on is uniform pulling. When I watch my teachers who are master pullers, I'm just amazed. I see what they're doing. I understand what they're doing. I could probably provide the commentary and narration in an educational video describing what they're doing. But when I try doing it myself, somehow it just doesn't work out quite as well. But I think that's just generally true with all experts in their activity, whether it's musicians or athletes or glass workers. The experts just make it look so easy. And I watch my teachers giving me a lesson and I think, oh, that's easy, no problem, I've got it. Then I go to the torch. Sometimes get very rudely surprised. So I'm going to attempt here, and we'll see how much success I have. I'm going to attempt to cut this off. I should have had my shear pre-positioned. Okay, hot end away from me. Actually, I'm going to put this piece in the kiln as I go to get my core. As the piece gets larger in size, I'll start using the NQALHA for assembly, but to start off with, just to get the first pieces tacked together, and I just realized something here that could potentially bite me in the butt. I'm going to be very careful about this. My label was on the other piece. When I separated the piece into two, I lost my label, so now I need to remember which piece is which. But hey, it's all about so what I did there, I used the L-marver as a guide to keep the edges lined up. And now I'm going to cut that off, hot end away from me, back to the flame. Get out my masher. I could use the squeezer for this, but like I said, sometimes hand tools are just a little easier and faster. Well, that's really encouraging. That went very, very well. So I am going to put it in the NQALHA just to kind of keep it hot as I go to the kiln and get the other piece. So far, I'm encouraged. So far, it seems like the process is going to work. But, hey, R&D can always be exciting, especially in things that I'm not yet an expert at. And even things that I am more experienced at. I spent most of my engineering career in the R&D lab, and let me see if I can find the hard talking and working at the same time when I'm trying to pay attention. I spent most of my engineering career in R&D labs, and that's the nature of R&D. It's always a little bit new, always a little bit unknown. Just trying to get it to tag here. And the first 3 layers are looking really good. I'm thinking that I'm on the road to success. Hot end away from me. Now this design is going to eventually be turned into a triangular section, and a question that I've been thinking about, and yes, I do lay in bed the day before I do one of these and try to go through the entire sequence in my mind, imagining, what do I do next? What do I do next? I've found in my engineering work that I have the best success when I go through the entire project in my mind and visualize every step, including visualizing what's going to go wrong. So I'm going to start very gently massaging the top of the piece, the pointy end, into a slightly triangular shape. As I progress, I'm going to start using the squeezer, and then finally at the end I'll be exclusively using the squeezer. And I was kind of imagining and debating with myself when to start using the squeezer, when to just do a little paddling, and I think I'm going to let the glass tell me. As I start observing the glass and feeling the glass, I think the glass will tell me when it's time to switch to the squeezer. And there is you probably can't see it on the camera, but it's a somewhat preliminary, kind of sort of getting into triangle shape. Of course, I'm going to need to, as I look at my skinny little moil down here, I'm starting to imagine that, boy, this thing is not going to be good for me as the piece gets heavier. So I'm going to make an unscheduled change here, and I'm going to grab a thin piece of glass. I was going to use a thicker piece of glass, but I think it might actually be better if I Yep. That got out of control quickly. I think I'm gonna go back to my trusted method of hand torch and NQALHA striping. I kind of thought that I could get away with doing it on the bench torch just to try to be a little quick and dirty, and you know, quick and dirty sometimes ends up not that good. So I'm pretty much guaranteed that this method is going to work. Now I have much more control. So, probably the next time I do it, I'll plan more carefully in advance and make a nice thick moil with a kind of a chisel point on the end, so I don't have to go back and do this remedial work, although I'm pretty sure that this will end up producing a good result, but it's always good to plan in advance. So getting a little bit of droop, a little bit too hot. I realize that learning to fix mistakes is a very important skill, very necessary to learn to be successful in anything. I just always prefer to not have to get into recovery mode. Now here I go, out of control. Yep. And of course this brings up a question. Do I leave this in the video? Should I edit out my mistakes? Or should I just treat my videos as, well, that was history. That's what happened at that time on that day. I'll probably end up adding some more to that moil as I go, but I think that helped a lot. And of course, there is a serious possibility here that I let my piece get too cold, and if I stick it right back in the fire, I may lose it. So into the kiln it goes as I extract the next layer, which is goldenrod. And I have a punty ready. Yeah, I should have had a punty more like that, with a large built-up section, a large conical kind of built-up section. But hey, I learn something every day. I am getting better. When I started glasswork, almost everything was improvised, almost everything was in recovery mode, almost everything was failure, attempted recovery, worse failure, even less successful attempted recovery. And it's only recently that I'm starting to actually achieve more success than failure. Glasswork is really hard. I think I've said that before. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever attempted to do. Okay. It is pulling very nicely. I'm getting fairly uniform, straight sides. Somewhat carefully managing the width. Yeah, that is getting very close. The resizing process is going extremely well. I'm kind of pleasantly surprised. That is certainly not perfect, but wow. It's actually kind of nice. Okay. I think I'm getting in the groove here. Uh-oh. Just as soon as I say I'm getting in the groove, my punty decided to take an unscheduled vacation. fairly sure there was some crap, some dust on my bench. So I think that guy is about reasonable. Okay, let's see if we can get everything safely reheated. I am going to clean up that awful boogery moil. Oh, don't let anybody see that. Yeah, I think it's time to switch to the NQALHA. I'm trying to somewhat accurately position this guy, although in this context I'm not even sure what accurate really means. Exactly where do I stick it? That got a little bit out of control there, and I'm not sure I can fix it, but I'm certainly going to give it a try. Once again, this is definitely R&D. It's R&D, and success is not guaranteed. I'm sure there are people out there in YouTube land who are really, really good at this. And if you care to offer any suggestions, boy, I love learning. So I'm attempting here to kind of massage the glass into place. I got it stuck a little bit off. I also ended up with a little bit of a crack in the other side when I was dicking around with, just what I was afraid of when I was dicking around with trying to fix my inferior moil. I got a little crack in the other side, but I am hopeful that I'll be able to just paddle it closed and have a happy day in recovery zone. I'd much rather get it done right the first time, but you know, developing recovery technique is an extremely important part of learning anything. There's a really good chance that that was a successful recovery. Boy, I hate recovery. But at least now I have a very much better puntee end moil. Very much better. Of course, I have some of the paint from the glassworking shop on the glass. That's probably not a good thing, unless it turns out to be the magic secret that people look at and go, "How'd you get that color, dude? I've never seen that color before." Oh, it's a secret. One thing that's kind of encouraging about this adventure, my recoveries are getting more successful. There was a time when attempted recoveries always, without a doubt, led to increasingly serious failure. And now, Sometimes I actually do recover. Of course, every time I start talking about recovery, I have a failure, so maybe I should just talk about something else. Nice weather we're having here in beautiful Nevada City in the Sierra foothills. I think I'm actually fairly close here to a full recovery. I like the sound of that. Full recovery. Back on track. Look at that. And just looking over at the oxygen tank, I am very, very, very close to being out of oxygen. So, just what I need is more trouble. Also, something I'm noticing here, I don't have any labels on my layers. So keeping track of these guys is becoming increasingly challenging. that little cold bit at the end when shearing off can be a real problem. That little bit of vibration at the end when the piece lets go can knock everything apart. Gotta be careful about that. So many things to be careful about. But it looks like I'm actually somewhat under control, somewhat uniform. I often wonder, even as my skill level increases, how perfect is it possible to do this kind of work? Of course, I've seen some truly astounding work by the master murrine artists, way, way beyond anything I've ever done. So, methinks there is much room for improvement, perfection. That one's somewhat better. I'm also learning how to kind of paddle it into shape. Maybe I need to take lessons. Of course, I've watched my teachers for many, many, many hours doing similar things, but nothing exactly like this. So I'm gonna see if I can get one squeeze done, because, like I said a little earlier, I'm kind of going to be letting the glass tell me when it's time to start squeezing. And I think the glass has spoken. Okay, so now I have assembled a, how many are there? 5 layer? Being very, very careful on that first squeeze. What do I have here? Yes, I do. I have 5 layers. I do have enough experience with the squeezer to know that at this stage in the process, it would be very, very easy to get the piece twisted, cockeyed, off center, off in a direction I don't want. I'll work on that moil a little bit. Well, so far, this is looking very much like success. It is certainly not perfection by any means, but it's actually looking quite nice. And I am starting to get happy. Okay, in the kiln it goes. Get my next piece out of the kiln. Yeah, probably should have prepared all of my punties in advance. Probably just in general, probably should, and I keep saying this over and over again, get my overall level of planning in glasswork. Less improvising, more planning. And that is an entirely reasonable punty. This method appears to be working very successfully, producing really good results, so I'm just going to continue. And actually, I misnumerated in my intro, and maybe I'll redo the intro. This is not going to be an 11 layer. It's going to be a 9 layer. Because I have 5 colors, but the center only appears once. And all of the other colors appear twice. And so it's not 5 times 2 plus 1, it's 4 times 2 plus 1. Okay. That, not perfect, but I believe that it will be adequate Of course, I always try to make everything as perfect as I possibly can. Maybe the answer for this is put the piece with the tag in the kiln trying to shear off the end cleanly, and if I shear it off when it's hot, I get some bending and some distortion, but if I let it get too cold, Then I have a bit of a problem when the shear hits the end and it gets kind of shocked a little bit. Well, methinks that this piece just about ready to stick. So I'm not sure if this is a good idea or not. Tagging it and then trying to hinge it over into place. Okay, at this point, very important to not lose track of what side I'm on, because it's pretty impossible to tell which colors are which at this point. Yes. Okay, that method worked better. I'm looking at the edge that I want to tag instead of having the edge away from me. And that I believe is another successful layer. Wow. This is going to be one big piece. I think I'm going to need to do some fairly serious squeezing because it's kind of drifting away from the ideal triangle shape, but I suspect that when it squeezes, the glass has to go somewhere and it's going to come out the bottom. I'm using a combination here, kind of making it up as I go. Using a combination of marver and squeezer. And just seeing what the glass is telling me. And I think what the glass may be telling me is that I need to put the piece in the kiln and switch to, let me check the radiant heat here, probably need to switch to a slightly larger triangle die because I'm using the fixed size dies where you need the right dimension. I can always switch back, but I have a feeling that this piece is going to get big. I also have a feeling that I might need to put it on a bigger punty. This thing might actually call for, a 20 millimeter punty. Yes. The larger dies are taking me in the direction that I want to go. The piece is looking more triangular all the time. I got a little problem on the bottom. But that's all part of learning to use this tool. I can only imagine Igor Sikorsky inventing the helicopter and then trying to teach himself how to fly a helicopter with his first crappy proto. At least my prototype squeezer works a little better than that first helicopter. that, well, boy. Becoming a triangle. And it looks like the inner layers are folding themselves pretty nicely. And I'm gonna put that back in the kiln, get out the last piece, and hopefully, I am so optimistic now, I think this thing actually might succeed. Love that Delta Mag. Give me that big fire. When I was debating on whether or not to buy it, I wondered, do I really need a fire-breathing dragon? Especially at my not yet expert skill level. I don't regret the purchase at all. Nice to have big fire when you need big fire. And not necessarily just because it's hotter. The Delta Mag fire is also just bigger. It's spread out over more area. So sometimes I use it for preheating a color rod or pulling a stringer anytime when I want distributed heat that isn't concentrated and focused. Yeah, I might have actually pulled that one down a little too far. For some reason, I remembered the piece being a little bit longer. See how much trouble I can get into trying to shorten it. Is that even possible? Like pushing a rope. But it's kind of working. Yeah. Not working super well, but I have no doubt that the next one of these, and the one after that, and the one after that, are going to be so much better. Okay, so this piece it's another thing I just learned. The outer pieces need to be bigger. Should be intuitively obvious to the most casual observer, but I am actually believing that I'll be able to deal with this. Yes, that last piece needs to be much bigger. But hey, we'll see. Might actually be an interesting effect. So much of what happens to me in glasswork, it's just a surprise. I have no idea how it's going to come out. This might actually come out pretty cool. And then again, if it doesn't, I'll make another one, and another one, and another one. I want my tool in the radiant heat. It won't be much fun to pick up. Probably ought to get one of those, I think they're called a gas saver, for a hand torch. And hey, getting hot in here. On a 80-degree day in beautiful Nevada City. Yep. That guy is definitely too small, no doubt about it. But who knows? It may be the cool thing that really makes the design work. Maybe a pleasant surprise. I originally believed that I was going to add the next pieces of the assembly in this session, but I'm just getting tired. Old guy getting tired. I think I'll just put it in the kiln and leave the next step for tomorrow. But hey, what a concept. I hope that my blacksmith inspiration, Alec, gets a chance to see this video and see what his work has inspired. I am such a fan of the University of YouTube. I have learned so much, and I thank all of the expert glassworkers, welders, machinists who share their many, many years of experience. And there are guys that have been doing this for 40 years who just go on YouTube and say, hey, you want to know my secret? I'll show it to you. And as I continue learning glasswork, I intend to share everything I learn. I understand that going back in history to the bad old days in Murano, they didn't like the idea of sharing at all. They'd hire an assassin to track you down and kill your ass if you gave away the secrets of the masters. And it's better now, especially YouTube channels like Torch Talk or Revere or Corning. They're doing a magnificent job of spreading the knowledge. But I do find still a little bit, some people are still a tiny bit sensitive. Some are more than a tiny bit sensitive. Some are downright terrified. And I can almost understand it that trying to make a living as an artist is insanely difficult. It's almost hard to imagine anything more difficult than trying to make a living as a glass artist. And I can understand how someone might be a little bit concerned about protecting their edge, but I also very strongly believe in sharing knowledge. So I'm going to share everything I learn. Of course, things that I invent, there is no controversy. It's my idea. I can give it away to anybody if I want. Things that I learn from teachers, take it on a case-by-case basis. If a teacher politely asks me, hey, you know, I'd appreciate it if you didn't share this, then fine, I'll respect them. When I was at Mothership doing the assembly video on the NQALHA with Scott Deppie, he took a break to do something else, some of the Mothership R&D, and he politely asked me, hey, please don't share this. No problem. I never shared it. The pattern isn't perfect, especially on the ends, but I have a feeling that by the time the thing gets pulled down and we end up with the inevitable waste that occurs in the knuckle, that I'll have enough usable material to make a hopefully nice looking piece. And then again, I've been surprised when patterns didn't work out completely, and what I thought was a mistake ended up being, oh, I don't know, that's kind of cool. Almost like that a little bit. Of course, the problem with accidental discoveries like that, I'll never duplicate them. Okay, what I'm doing to try to get it more uniform, using a combination of things, using the flat marver to knock the corners down a little bit, get them in line. And then when I put it in the squeezer, if I'm trying to get the punty end to be a little bigger, I apply a little bit of pressure. If it's bulging in the middle, I apply a little heat at the end and see if I can let gravity help me out. When I first started using the squeezer, I believed that, hey, it's a machine, it'll do everything. Don't have to learn any other technique. Don't have to come up with any other ideas. The machine will do everything. And didn't take long to discover that that's not true. It's somewhat difficult to deal with a triangular piece in the NQALHA. Even doing it by hand and concentrating the flame on the surfaces, I can see that I'm overheating the edges. And with just a pure rotation, probably going to be even worse. So hopefully my overheated edges won't ruin the design. Now, I don't need to get my surfaces totally perfect at this point because there's a lot more work to be done to this piece. At least according to the current plan, there's a lot more work. I may actually change the plan and just use it as it is. I don't know. But one way or another, today's glasswork is complete. And there we have a triangle. And yeah, it does definitely have a burned corner, but hey, maybe I'll fix it. Thank you for watching.